United Methodist. There's a full bio here in your program. They are very active in Philippine solidarity work and have received awards and published articles and have shown up at many, many actions, only a few of which I have actually been at, but I have always appreciated their witness. I first encountered Pastor Janelle at an action called Third World for Black Power in 2014. And I was like, oh, that's the gospel with the power analysis. That's how you do that. Because, you know, systems of injustice will co-opt anything. And empire has done its best to co-opt Christianity. And sometimes I lose track of what it looks like to see the gospel with a power analysis. So I really appreciate that Pastor Janelle brings that, and I'm looking forward to the word this morning. Please welcome Pastor Janelle Abola.
Lower everything. Okay. All right. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me here to speak. It's really an honor to be here with you all and to worship with you all this Sunday morning. Even though we're not great in number, the energy here is like beyond what I have felt in a really, really long time. Yeah. So I'm really impressed by that. I'm really touched by that, and I feel like opened up because of that. So I want to thank you all for the ways that you have blessed me just in this time that we've been in the same space together. I want us to open up with a chant, all right? So I'm going to say, we have the right to, and you're going to say, right to exist. And I'm going to say, we have the right to, you're going to say, right to resist, right? We have the right to
exist.
We have the right to
Resist.
We have the right to
Exist.
We have the right to
Resist.
All right, cool. I'm going to teach you one more chant. We say this in the Philippines, and we also say this in the movement of solidarity with the Philippines. It's Maki Baka. So I will say Maki Baka, which means do not fear. Or no, it means struggle. It means to join the struggle, join the fight. And then you will say Wag ma takot. Say that real quick. Wag ma takot. That means do not fear. I appreciate that chant because it's a chant of love, right? To join the struggle, to join the fight is an act of love. The love that we were talking about earlier, the love that is hard, the love that is messy, but the love that is necessary in this world. So I'll say Maki Baka, and you'll say Wag ma takot. Maki Baka.
Wag ma takot.
Maki Baka. Wag ma takot. All right, cool. So yes, I'm the lead pastor at Pine United Methodist Church in the Richmond in San Francisco, and I'm ordained clergy in a denomination that has in their book of discipline discriminatory policies against ordaining out LGBTQ clergy. I managed to get through the system. So people may ask, why do I stay in a denomination that has a policy against me? Isn't that hypocritical for me to stay somewhere? Sometimes it upsets me that my very humanity is in question by the church that my family has been part of for at least 3 generations. Sometimes it's just another one of those spaces that doesn't fully accept me, yet I have to navigate it. I have to navigate it because of the way this world identifies me by trying to fragment me into these categories. I've had to navigate many places that didn't actually accept me for various reasons, didn't want me for various reasons, were afraid of me for various reasons, or just straight up didn't know what to do with me. You know, some of you have seen me at actions in the streets. I walk around with my clergy collar, and I can feel it, you know, that it causes cognitive dissonance for some folks. You see me outside of a church setting. Is it because I'm not cisgender male? Is it because I'm Asian? Is it because I get read for younger than I am? Is it because I look queer? These are all categories of folks that churches have historically and currently had a hard time accepting and welcoming fully. Who many of us are goes against the grain of the way of empire, which stands on the pillars of patriarchy, heterosexism, transphobia, racism, ageism, and ableism in various ways. Being considered not the ideal by dominant culture isn't new to me. I'm not saying I'm necessarily used to it or numb to it, but it just isn't something that's new to me. And for the ancient Hebrews mentioned in our text today, prior to leaving Egypt, being enslaved to empire was nothing new to them. They had been enslaved for generations. They had been toiling under Egypt for generations, and for many, that was the only life that they had ever known. To be liberated from enslavement under Egypt then was a total reorientation of their identity and how they navigated their world and their relationship with God. Today's text comes in celebration, welcoming this new identity, this new phase of who they would become. So I realize that this text, to some folks, it might sound violent, you know, horse and rider thrown into the sea, Pharaoh's chariots and his army hurled into the sea, the depth to which the captains sink into the sea, the enemy shattered, opponents overthrown, an angry warrior God. But these were the symbols of an empire that enslaved. Yes. These were the symbols of the worldly might of oppression. The legacy of a civilization that thrived on the backs of the toiling laborers that were treated as less than human on a daily basis for generations and generations. Slavery had entered into the genetic code of the ancient Hebrews by this time. Empire insisted on defining them and imposing one truth upon them, one truth, that their lives were not worth saving, that they were only good for service to the Egyptian empire, that they were not worth God saving. With the story of the Exodus, however, this imperialist truth is shattered and exposed as an utter lie. And it is the liberation from that lie and the tools of that lie that inspires the song in our text today. Our song, led by Miriam, the first woman to be called a prophet. Actually, some might speculate whether the words of this song were composed even while the ancient Hebrews were still enslaved, before they had fled Egypt. I guess some folks really didn't have faith that this was a freestyle type of thing, and they could have came up with the words on the spot. But anyway, got it. Some might speculate, how is it that they had tambourines already on hand to use while they celebrated their liberation? They were enslaved. They were enslaved. Why would they have instruments for joy in the midst of that level of oppression? So I currently serve, as you'll see in your bulletin and has been announced, I currently serve as co-chair of the California-Nevada Philippine Solidarity Task Force of the United Methodist Church. I've been involved with this ministry since 2008, leading delegations to the Philippines every summer to be exposed, so for folks to be exposed to the human rights situation there. The human rights situation where folks here don't know very much about. Yes. We do this ministry in partnership and in response to the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, who work very closely with people's organizations there on the ground. They're the ones who appealed to church folks here to respond to the extrajudicial killings that were increasing in the Philippines around 2006 and 2007. The killings of those folks who were being seen as speaking out against the government. It was the killing of activists, the killing of women, the killing of students, and any church person who was seen as a threat to the government. Wow. Some of you have probably heard about currently the extrajudicial killings these days as a result of the war on drugs in the Philippines under President Duterte. Yes. The war on drugs, the killings, is a result of an over-militarized police force. Yes. A police force that has too much power, that has developed in the culture of impunity. It is possible that, that this militarized police force will only become stronger and fortified by the declaration of martial law that may come this week, actually, and might be declared across the entire country of the Philippines. For those of you who don't know, martial law has been declared in Mindanao, in the southern part of the Philippines, and the president and other people in the government are looking to extend that. The war on drugs in the Philippines is a war on the poor. Thousands have been killed without trial, without say. When we were in the Philippines, we actually met with families that had lost their loved ones because of this war on drugs. Some of the mothers told us about the search that they had for their children. Some of them told us that the funeral service, when the cops came to their home to find the accused person, the funeral service was outside ready to grab the body. That's how much doom is in this whole war on drugs. There's nothing that you can say if you are accused. You are basically going to lose your life. Not only that, the funeral service comes in and they try to exploit the family. They take the body away and they say, you have to pay us in order to get that body back, and you have to pay for the autopsy that we did. So the funeral service makes thousands of pesos on this, and they also give a cut to the police that are conducting this war on drugs. This week, a lot of folks nationwide are participating in a week of action against the war on drugs and against martial law in the Philippines. And if you want more information, you can go to Katie, she has information. This week, we're trying to increase our participation, and especially the participation of our churches that have had a history of defending the lives of the poor and the oppressed. This war on drugs is also an excuse, a reason. Martial law is also an excuse, a reason for U.S. military presence in the Asia Pacific to increase as well. If martial law is declared all across the Philippines, that opens up the door for even more U.S. military presence there. And we know that the Philippines and the U.S. has had a long colonial history that began with the genocide of Filipino people. And it continues with the devaluing of Filipino lives to foreign interests. Over 5,000 Filipinos leave the Philippines every day for work because there's no livelihood in the Philippines. They leave every day only to find that they had escaped into another Egypt. However, in the midst of it, in the midst of meeting these folks, in the midst of connecting with people in the Philippines, they were still prepared for joy. Like the ancient Hebrews, we were still prepared for joy. The families who have been victims of the drug war, they are part of an organization now created by the church called Rise Up. And during our trips in the Philippines, when the president gives their State of the Nation address, we, the people, have the biggest mobilization. And people come from all over the Philippines, sometimes on foot, to go to the people's State of the Nation address. The people giving their testimony of what's really happening in the Philippines. And the Rise Up families, some of them had never been to SONA. It was their first time being at the State of the Nation address. And they did a cultural performance. They danced. They danced to a song that played out the journey of the search for their loved ones, the journey of looking for the bodies of their loved ones, and the journey of searching for justice. It was a cultural performance that they did because it was a way to tell the story, but it was a way for them to also experience healing. It was a way for them to also proclaim that they may take away our families and our loved ones, but on behalf of our families and our loved ones, we will not be rendered silent. We will not be rendered paralyzed. We will continue to dance. We will continue to tell our stories. The ancient Hebrews singing, remembering those they'd lost along the way. The ancient Hebrews singing, remembering the beatings that they had taken, the brutality that they had experienced, the babies that they had lost, the loved ones that they had lost under Egypt's brutality, under empire's brutality. All of this comes up for them as they sing this song of celebration. I also, this past trip, we visited political prisoners in Camp Bagong Diwa. It's a maximum security prison. And while we were there meeting with them, one of them had written a song. First of all, there's a guitar in there, in the prison. Second, they had written a song, and it was a song of hope. It was a song of connection that even though they were behind bars, even though their bodies were in prison, their spirits and their fervor for justice was not imprisoned. The wonderful thing was that when we visited the political prisoners, we were able to learn that song from them. We wrote down the chords, we wrote down the lyrics, and then we took it with us so that it could leave the prison. So that others who were longing for liberation, others who were mourning for the ones who were imprisoned, others who were longing for justice could also sing these same songs. And mobilizations, whether it be for immigration, for defending DACA, whether it be for Black Lives Matter, whether it be for Palestine, whatever issues we have, we sing, we continue to sing our songs of love and liberation. We chant, we preach, whether we're clergy or not, we preach. I've heard so many good sermons in the streets. And it reminds me of a Filipino farm worker, Carlos Bulosan, and a writer. And he found himself in Egypt, in the Egypt of California. And he writes in this poem that he calls the Song for Chris Mensalva's birthday. He writes, "And we won, we will win, because for truth, for beauty, for life, we fight for the splendor of love. They are afraid, my brother. They are afraid of our mighty fists, my brother. They are afraid of the magnificence of our works, my brother. They are even afraid of our songs of love, my brother." That line has become a very popular one. They are even afraid of our songs of love. They continue to hurt our bodies, imprison our bodies, because they are afraid of our love. They are afraid of our love for one another. They are afraid that we will uplift one another, that we contribute to the liberation of one another. They are afraid of our survival. They are afraid of our humanity. They are afraid. And so it's important that we celebrate that we are still here. Despite attempts to break us apart, to imprison us, to silence us, to displace us, attempts to annihilate us, attempts to erase our histories and who we are still here. In an empire that hates who we are, queer, trans, black and brown, women, poor, we are still here. And we will sing songs of love and liberation, and we will still sing songs of liberation, and we will love and liberate as best as we can. We will take to the streets and we will stand together. Our very lives are a means of resistance. Our breath is a means of resistance, and that breath is given to us by God. I pray that we continue working towards defending the existence of others worldwide. We know this movement is bigger than Oakland, it's bigger than the Bay Area, it's bigger than the United States. It's a worldwide movement because everywhere people are resisting in order to exist. I pray that we are doing the best with our gift of life and our gift of breath, our gift of time, and the moments of joy that we experience, that we use those moments to fuel liberation. I pray that we ponder these things because our songs, our chants, our stories of survival and resistance will be part of the canon of a liberated people moving forward. Maki baka, huwag matakot. Maki baka, huwag matakot. Maki baka, huwag matakot. Amen.